the influence of the voice, songs, and communicating with others. It is necessary to recall the importance of art within the movement of Extinction Rebellion. Art is a universal form of expression that has existed for as long as humans have had tools to leave impressions on natural surfaces. In this episode, I'm joined by Lilek from Extinction Rebellion, and we begin the task of explaining what in fact is Extinction Rebellion, where some of the influences originate from, and we scratch the surface of what climate and social justice activism entails. Lilek also gives us an introduction to Earth Holder, which we will delve deeper into in our next episode. The lovely voice you are about to hear is Lilek's. Thank you, Lilek, for your time and fascinating insight into the world of Extinction Rebellion. Enjoy.
I'm walking on the earth. I'm talking to the earth. She whispers in my ear, slow down, my dear. She whispers in my ear, slow down, my dear. I'm walking on the earth. I'm talking to the earth. She tells me I know. Let go, let go, let go. She tells me I know. Let go, let go, let go. I'm walking on the earth. I'm talking to the earth. She answers to me. Just be, just be, just be. She answers to me. Just be, just be, just be.
I'm joined by Lilek from Extinction Rebellion, but also Earth Holder, and these are two organizations which we will talk about. Lilek, thank you very much for joining me.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Zach, for inviting me.
Yeah, a lot of people haven't got a clue, of course, but we met, I think it was it a week ago or 2 weeks ago? Do you remember?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and it was the first time we'd actually met, and we had like this crazy, in-depth, spiritual, philosophical, fantastic conversation for an hour, almost like we'd known each other for years. And I really appreciate the openness and the way that we just sort of jumped into our topics. And so I just wanted to thank you for that experience, which was so positive for me, by the way.
Well, thank you for being so open too, and it was very easy to talk to you and to talk with you.
Yeah, well, that helps that your English is so good, of course. Yeah, but you're also, if I'm slightly off topic, but if I do remember correctly, you also said you're a bit of a performer, aren't you?
Well, yeah, I've been a singer for many years, not professionally, which means I don't have to earn money with it. Of course, I want to get paid, but I don't need to. I don't need to get money to make a living. And I made that choice very consciously. But I'm a performer at heart, and I like to talk to people and communicate with people. And music and singing is a very special way of communicating with people and of conveying messages which are sometimes intellectual, but more spiritual and emotional. And this is what I really enjoy, which is what is missing in my life right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I asked the question because I think, as you correctly, obviously alluded to in that spiritual element there, that the voice has a particular value in our existence, but also as a musical medium. The ability of delivering certain kinds of messages through song is a very, very ancient human tradition, which we can actually experience across many cultures.
Yeah, and like let's say I said this element is missing in my life right now. Let's say it is partly missing because here comes the spiritual part. I usually go and visit the monastery where I practice, or like my spiritual home in southwest France, Plum Village, which is also the name of the tradition that I practice in. I visited like two, if possible, 3 times a year. And I usually sing there. Like I'm invited to sing. I do deep relaxations and I sing spiritual songs of our tradition, but also other spiritual songs and fun songs for people. And I always get amazing feedback that people can relax more deeply, or they can like access feelings, or they're just very happy and entertained by the songs. And those songs of practice, for example, are very important in our tradition because my teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, who died last year, he was over 90 years old, so we had quite some time with him, luckily. So he always encouraged people to compose songs about the practice, about mindfulness practice, about their insights, and about community. And he also encouraged any form of arts. He wanted to, that's not a tradition where you're not allowed to sing or dance or do those things, like in some other Buddhist traditions. But in this tradition, you're really encouraged to express yourself, and it's actually valued, it's cherished. And this is such a blessing for me because I can be there as I am, and people also like value my talents, and I can integrate that. I don't have to separate it from my practice, but it's welcome there. And this is also a part that we will talk about the integrity and the integration of so many things, and that you can integrate spirituality into activism or vice versa, or that it can be both combined, and that it's actually quite a good combination.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they fit so well, sort of hand in glove, I don't think it's a coincidence. But as with many of these traditional elements to human development, quite a lot we have forgotten about in favor of more convenient methods of communicating and doing things, whether that's digitalization or some other kind of process. And sometimes when people are looking for the value in friendship and they miss it, it's because we have decided to overlook our basic connections, and so on. But as you said, this is something we will come back to. So I very much value these parts of our conversation because it serves to highlight that there is so much importance in the simple things that we can do that we tend to forget that. That's why I wanted to introduce this straight away so that people would realize this is some of the basis from which a lot of the experiences that we talk about will come from.
Exactly.
Yeah. What's also interesting is, as an introduction to how we got into contact, it's a big part of that I would love for you to explain in a moment about Extinction Rebellion. But I have for a long time wanted to speak to one of the, and this is what's quite funny, one of the leaders, as it were, of Extinction Rebellion. And so I contacted them via what the platform formerly known as Twitter. They responded very kindly and said, look, this is our map. So you pick, this website will give you, this is a link to our global map. You have a look where you are, and you contact whichever one of the sort of chapter organizations or points of contact that you wish. And obviously you are the first that I got in touch with, and you responded, and here we are having this wonderful conversation. But obviously, I started from this misconception that Extinction Rebellion has perhaps a supreme leader, or I don't know what, blah, 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 as this universal global organization. And that's not what they are, is it?
Well, before
Yeah.
I elaborate on that, I have to tell the listeners this funny story that because of my name Lilek, which is my activist name, and it's, by the way, it's Czech and it means eggplant, um, that you thought that I was a Polish man, actually, and that when we met, you were so surprised that you were like, "Are you Lilek? Are you Lilek?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I'm Lilek. Hello, Zach." And so, like, I don't know, like 2 hours into our conversation, you told me that, or even when saying goodbye, and I was so yeah, so amused about that, because of course you couldn't know, but I'm sometimes mistaken for a Polish woman, but never for a Polish man. So thank you. That it kind of enriched my identity options, let's say. Yeah. Well, and now to your question. Well, Extinction Rebellion is an SOS, a self-organizing system. I would say that there are kind of founders, but there are no leaders. And this is a big difference, though. I think you contact those people from the UK, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're really amazing. I mean, some of, especially, what's her name? She is really, really smart and really, really sensitive. And funny enough, I saw her when she was giving a talk in an online retreat from Plum Village, which was called Action from the Heart, and it was about activism. And she had a vision of how to found that kind of movement and what this kind of movement needed. And one of the things that she wanted to integrate, and there you have a first parallel, is the arts. She said, we need the arts, we need some kind of artistic expression, and we need to express ourselves artistically. And this kind of, let's say, organization does only work Europe-wide or worldwide when there is not one leader. But when there are groups that are independent and that can make their own decisions. For example, Extinction Rebellion UK just decided not to do civil disobedience anymore because the legal aspects or the legal situation in the UK has changed dramatically for activists, which has not been the case so far in Germany. It's kind of changing right now also through the last generation, and there are massive protests, there are massive civil disobedience, but it is still like easier to do civil disobedience or gluing yourself to the street or whatever without going to jail for 2 or 3 or 7 years, you know. So it is not possible to tell everyone in Europe, when you want the organization to spread, what to do, because also as a leader, even in the country, like if there were one person who was the leader of Extinction Rebellion Germany, they would not know what works in Hamburg or what works in Munich and how people react, how people respond. So it's like act local, right? It's like eating. You need to think global. You are in a global network. You are in this climate justice movement, and you want to make sure that you also have a network which connects you to other movements. But you also have your local focus, which means that you can change something in your city or in your area. And those can be very specific, very different things. And it also depends on the creativity of people, because of course it's not easy, Zach. It's not easy not to have a leader, because this self-organization is something that you have to kind of understand, and where you have to be involved, of course, for things to work. And some groups, they don't survive that, or it depends on the members in the groups. If you have enough people who are engaged and who are willing to to put themselves forward or give ideas and then let go of these ideas, of course, because it's a group process, then it can work. But if you don't, and through COVID, for example, the situation changed rapidly and radically, and we had to adapt. So this is something that also changes the way how we act or how we organize ourselves. But we are not the secret service of the climate justice movements or something like that.
Yeah, which there is this reputation with either Extinction Rebellion, but also Last Generation, that people have this concept, which is I find quite interesting. But also one of the benefits to the system that you've outlined is that by not having an individual or a body within a certain country to be the sort of global leaders, what that removes from the equation is the possibility of a power grab, or people trying to use this as a means of enrichment, which has in some ways taken attention away from other movements, because they've said, look, this person, they just want to make money. They've gone out and they benefited from this, and then they've just gone ahead and bought some expensive car or an expensive home and blah, blah, blah. But with this kind of organization, that doesn't happen, because there is no one individual who benefits more than the movement.
It's totally ridiculous. I told you in our first conversation already that now we have a Spiegel documentary, that kind of investigative but very populist journalism. And they have like half an hour about Last Generation, behind the scenes, the real structure of Last Generation. I'm like missing myself, because it's so funny. I'm not within the core group, but I'm in the outer circle, and the structures are clear. They're very transparent. And I'm like, why do people make those things up? Because, of course, we're like the climate justice movements that do this, especially civil disobedience, they're perceived as we are other than the normal folks who work and blah, 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 which is not entirely true, because we do work. I do work. And for that, for example, it's like I was telling someone, like when you work and you really put your heart into it, and it's maybe a social job and you do it because you love it, don't you think you should still be paid? And people go like, yeah, sure, if it's your job. And I said, yeah. And this is how some activists get paid who do it full time, because they cannot invest so much time and energy and have a normal work, which we perceive like the work that we perceive as normal, or as we say, a bread job in German. And so in this context, people think that we all do things like for free, which is mostly true. I don't get any money for what I do. And I don't, for now, I don't need it. I don't want it, because this is my passion. But if I had to, if I gave up my job for doing full-time activism, then of course I would need something to live from. And so you get a kind of grant. And you can apply for, but there's nothing that you can enrich yourself with, especially because, of course, there are legal costs that need to be paid from those funds. So if you're active, then you have other costs that are on top.
Yeah, this is an issue of being involved in this kind of political work, voluntary work, where you work within an organization, perhaps, or loosely, depending on the structure. And people look at it and they say, oh, that person's just doing it for the money because they've earned money. And it's very interesting how within such a capitalistic system that we have.
Yeah, exactly.
When volunteers say, well, look, I need to earn a bit of money because I can't just dedicate 100% of my life to this. And people say, you want money? You want money, do you? So that, 1 minute. You are a capitalist. Your entire existence is based upon profiteering. And here I'm saying I simply want a fair wage to do something good for everyone. And that's being thrown at me like it's some kind of a weapon. The contradictions within this criticism I do find interesting.
And not only in this criticism, but in many more, and you can actually deconstruct it. But it's like we recently had a talk with the FDP, like the liberal one of the leaders of the liberals, because we also talk, like I'm in a different group which is called Schwarm for Future, and we talk to politicians, and we even try to talk to the liberal guy, and we could easily deconstruct his ideas about why we cannot invest in sustainability as much as we should, or whatever, why we can't stop nuclear power, la la la. But his ideology is so locked up in itself that it's so hard to enter, and that's kind of the thing that we see here, that people think when you do something good for the society, or some don't even think that it's something good, but they kind of all get that it's work, it's something that you invest a lot in, then they think it can't be something that they do because there's idealists, or I don't know, they're good people, but it's for the money. And that's something that is so far away from my own thinking. And I want to just briefly show you the book that I'm reading, because it fits very well into what you just said. Let me get it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to support myself morally, and I saw this book. It's a bestseller, Im Grunde gut. And the original title, it's a Belgian author, Humankind, it's called.
Okay.
And it's about humans being actually quite good people, especially when there are catastrophes and when the situation is worsening. They try to help each other. And the problem about it is that humans themselves don't believe in their goodness. They don't believe that this can be true, although apparently he's talking about science here. He deconstructs very famous experiments, social psychological experiments, that have proven that mankind, or man, is bad. He actually says they're a fraud, and he can prove it. So the problem about us is not believing in our own goodness. And I think this is exactly what people fall for when they say this cannot be true, that you're an activist because you believe in what you do. It's just because you want the money, because this is how we're raised, and this is how our world functions, more or less.
Yep, we are conditioned to believe that only a selfish individual can in any way benefit from a specific situation. We have to look after number one. And this is the basis of a lot of our educational systems, unfortunately. Can you give me just mention the author's name so that I can put it in the notes later?
Yeah, sure. His name is Rutger Bregman. A New Story of Humankind. And it's very easy to read. It's entertaining and still with good scientific foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I agree with the little that you have explained of the book, because I've often thought as well, a lot of people, when you ask them to do something good, or you ask them to just believe in the possibility of something good happening, the spontaneous response is, but that's how it is. That's how we are. And straight away, this is one of the most defeatist sentiments I've ever heard, because you're basically saying, I recognize that the situation is shit, but I don't want to change it because that's the natural situation. And I can't see why people are so satisfied to accept the status quo when the status quo is unacceptable.
Well, apparently it's not unacceptable yet, which is a problem, because when it becomes unacceptable, it's really almost too late, or it's quite late, and it's already late. And for people in the South, not only the global South, but also in Greece, for example, where Greece was like burning this summer and was so hot that even the locals said, wow, this is not normal anymore. It becomes unacceptable. And like when your water is rationed. I just read that the Berlin Senate is working on a plan of rationing the water because Brandenburg and Berlin are, funny enough, we're in the northeast, but we're the driest state in Germany.
Mm.
This will come.
Mm. They should give more groundwater then to the Tesla battery factory.
Oh my God, this is something this is my spiritual practice. Like as soon as you mention it, I'm like breathing in, breathing out. I cannot change it right now. Yeah, but it's this is just lunatic.
Mm. Yeah, it was absolutely crazy. And people said to them that, look, this is the groundwater which is going to serve Berlin as well. And we've got enough. Yeah, of course you do. And
although scientists said the opposite, and many tests had not been run, and whatever. So this is just like, this makes me believe rather in the bad side of humankind than in the good side. But I'm training, Zach. I'm training.
Yeah, I'm sorry to remind you of these awful things, but but let's jump back into the positivity. So, okay, we've talked about Extinction Rebellion a little bit, and this is like a mini series where we're going to develop our understanding of Extinction Rebellion. And before we jump into the Earthholder mission, which I'm keen to do, you spoke before about Plum Village, and this is your spiritual home. But also when we met, you said that there was a strong combination between Extinction Rebellion's founders and Plum Village. Do I remember that correctly?
Yes, you do. As far as I know, the founders, not all of them, but some of them, they are practitioners. And they try to work with some monks and nuns who are very engaged, also because they were journalists before, for example, and they still have this strong link to society and social issues more than other people in the monastery. So they try to work with them and see how they could integrate the practice, like the mindfulness aspects, in this form of activism to make it more sustainable, because we're talking about regenerative cultures, which is a basis of Extinction Rebellion, and which means that we're trying to be the change. We come from a toxic system, we live in a toxic system, but we want to change the system. So we try to start where we are in our organization, and we try to do activism in the way that it's not only effective, but that it's long-term. Because one of the problems of our society is our short-term vision or short-term way of thinking, and we have to think long term, and also in our activism, because it cannot be done in a week or in a year.
Yeah, whenever you mention this, and I think we also spoke about this when we met, short-termism and then medium-term, long-term. Realistically speaking, having such short-term political roles or terms when politicians are elected means that the political rulers of our society do not in any way engage in long-term thinking. All they care about is the election cycle. So they want to satisfy people in the now, and then next year's issue. Well, we'll talk about next year's issue after the election. That's not my problem. I might not be here in this role anymore. And this lack of universal responsibility, not just for re-election, but for society and the environment, is really killing us. And I don't understand why we allow that to happen. If the people were more demanding of their politicians, then their politicians would not be allowed or able to be so selfish.
I think so too. I agree with you. And the funny thing is that I come back to the book because not only him, but he writes it to Rutger Bregman. He says, well, our big evolutionary advantage was and is cooperation. It's because we cooperate so well as a species even maybe more than the other human species that existed before us, or like even at the same time of the Homo sapiens in the beginning. We are so good in imitating social learning and cooperation that we could, let's say, in a way succeed. We could survive, although we were so fragile. And this is still happening every day, of course, but politics seem to kind of be excluded from that. Or let's say, what I want to say is, if we saw this as a cooperative effort, and we need to see it as a cooperative effort, because it's about us as a people, but us as humankind, and also us as the ecosystem of the earth, which we're trying to save. If we saw it as a cooperative effort, we would act differently, and we would understand that we have the same goal and that we kind of need to get there. And of course, we have to discuss, but maybe there's no best solution. And I can see that in the discussion about climate change or measures that have to be taken, mitigation. We discuss so much, and everyone seems to have the best solution, which the others don't favor, that we lose time. And instead of doing something and doing, let's say, the obvious, which we can do, which will certainly help, we're still talking about solutions and technical solutions that might never happen, or that might be ready when it's already too late. And so this is where, for example, the work of Joanna Macy comes into play, the work that reconnects, which is also a way of thinking about time differently. She says, exactly what you said, we need to adopt this view of thinking in generations, not only the next generation or the generation afterwards, but the next 7 generations, like in some indigenous traditions. And if we have that long-term view, we will think about the consequences of our actions in the now differently. Of course, that's a big thing. I know that it's not easy, but it does like open your view, and it does help to take certain decisions.
Yep. Well, this is also the unfortunate side effect, I guess, of this age-old European superiority, where these European colonialists refuse to accept the sense of indigenous traditions, because they believe themselves to be superior, that their methods, their strength was absolute. So to tell people, actually, do you know what? We've been screwing up for the last 300 or 400 years. Actually, you need to do it this way. It's unfortunately quite difficult for some people to understand that. And it is a throwback, and it should make some people realize we are not completely over colonialism. In fact,
not at all.
Yeah, colonialism is relived on a daily basis. It just has a nicer smile on its face, perhaps now.
I'm not sure about that. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I think it's not about the colonialism in the old days where you went to a different country or a different continent and you put your flag there and said, okay, this is my territory now. Of course, maybe that's what you mean. It's more through consumption. It's more through who you let in, who you treat how. And this is also, it's good that you mention it, because one part of regenerative cultures is decolonizing your mind, because this is also not regenerative. Regenerative cultures are about the well-being of all, of you as a subject, then your community, the society, but also the whole. And it's also part of what we earth holders, and we will talk about that more in the next section, but maybe I can give a kind of preview. That's what we try to focus on, to help people understand that we are connected, no matter what. And I think kind of people know, because we're talking about the globalization. And we're talking about globalization, and everyone knows about it and says, "Yeah, I know, la la." But what does that mean? What does that mean for us here in the global north, for example? And this is what we're not really able to change right now, because in part what you said, because we think we cannot change anything.
Yeah, that's the way it is, and so therefore we are fixed in this paralysis of inactivity, because it is what it is, and unfortunately, it's not what it is, but it's what we make it. And there you are. Thank you, Lilek.
Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Two and a mic. Two.